Do you want to know the secret to the perfect honeycomb? It's a little bit weird, but it's gelatine. Gelatine traps the air bubbles, making them a little bit smaller, more consistent, and it will give you a honeycomb that's pretty much a spot-on copycat of the store-bought crunchy bars that we love so much. And so I'm going to give you a few tips along the way because there's only a few ingredients, there's a few pressure points, but with a little bit of help, you can really nail it and nobody will know the difference. So start with a really big saucepan because remember the honeycomb is going to sort of expand and you don't want it to like crawl out of the pot. So nice big saucepan, and we're going to use the Natura Sugars Golden Caster Sugar today. It's a very light bodied sugar and I don't want too much flavor in because it's going to caramelize, and the super fine texture means that it dissolves really easily. We've got glucose as well. I always add the glucose first because otherwise the sugar takes longer to get to the heat at the bottom. I've just popped it in the microwave to make it easier to work with, but if you're using a scale, you can just weigh it straight into your pot. And then the caster sugar. Oh, it's so beautiful, it's like sand. And the water. So the water is there just to help it dissolve a little bit faster. It's going to basically all simmer off anyway. And then we're going to put on the heat. So we're going to start with it on a really low heat because we want the sugar to dissolve before it boils. If you start boiling it straight away and you put it on a high heat, there's risk that it crystallizes and it will end up more like fudge than honeycomb. Try also not to agitate it too much up the sides of the pots. You don't want any sugar up there because the same thing happens. If you do get a little bit on there, you can always brush it with a pastry brush and some hot water just to kind of wash the crystals down the sides. Okay. In the meantime, I'm going to do the gelatine. So because we're using such a small amount of gelatine, we're going to work with a bigger quantity and only use some of it later. So this is powdered gelatine and I'm just going to pour the water over, and this is called blooming. Basically the gelatine sucks up all the water and then is ready to be used. The other thing you need is a thermometer. It's going to make your life a lot easier because we're boiling it to 140 degrees Celsius first, and then we're going to take it up to 150, and that will give you that beautiful snap. And it's quite hard to sort of eyeball a temperature like that. They're not expensive and they will really sort of level up your baking and make it way more precise, and you'll get much better results that way. So once the sugar has dissolved completely, we're going to bring the sugar syrup to a boil. And when you start boiling it, you'll see that the bubbles are really big, and they're very uneven. Some are big, some are small. And as the sugar syrup goes through its various stages, the bubbles will get more and more consistent. So it's quite interesting to watch that process. So the temperature is now at 140. So we're going to add the honey. The reason why we add the honey so late is that honey caramelizes at a different temperature, so we don't want it to burn. So we're going to stir that in, just gently. We don't want to agitate it too much, and then we're going to carry on simmering it until 150 degrees. The bubbles are starting to look very different from what they looked like right in the beginning. They're more consistent, they're getting smaller. And so we're almost there. Okay, so the temperature is at 150. Now I've turned off the heat and we're going to let it stand just for about 5 minutes. Then we're going to add in our gelatine. So I'm going to measure out half a teaspoon of the bloomed, sponged gelatine. It's quite a weird texture. So that I'm ready. And once that's cool, you're gonna work quite quickly because you have to add the gelatine, stir it very, very well to make sure that it melts properly. And then we're gonna add the bicarb, which is the super fun part. I've got my baking tray ready. It's lined with baking paper, and that's the important thing about honeycomb is you can't be faffing around and trying to, you should have everything ready, because once it decides to rise, we'll wait for no one. Okay, so our sugar syrup has been resting now. So I'm gonna add the gelatine. Oh, that's a little bit more. And mix it quickly. And then we're quickly gonna add the bicarb. As soon as it starts bubbling up, we're gonna pour it out. So what I like to do is, if it's a bit of a warm day, I put mine straight into the freezer just to set the structure. The caramel carries on cooking, so in the middle it might carry on cooking and even burn, and we don't want that. So the quicker we can set it, the better the texture is going to be at the end. So I'm going to pop this in the freezer. So our honeycomb is set, and now I'm going to cut it into pieces with a nice sharp knife. Ooh, it's looking promising. Is this working? Ooh! 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 Kate versus the honeycomb.
Where you got it from?
Oh, look how pretty. So pretty. Whoa! Look. Because I'm extra, I'm going to dip mine in chocolate and sprinkle it with a bit of sea salt. Once the chocolate is set, you're going to store it in an airtight container to make sure that it doesn't absorb humidity from the air and go sticky. I like to save these silica gel sachets from my shoes and handbags when I buy them. You know, you get them in the shoebox. And I save them because if you pop one of these into the container or a Ziploc bag, it sucks up any extra moisture in the air and it will stop them from going sticky. Nice little tip. But don't eat them. Eat this instead. Because this one doesn't fit on the edge. You can see the bubbles are starting to look very different from what. Moment of truth. So our honeycomb. Put your left shoe in and your left gloopy puddle. Silica shells. What's wrong with my brain?